After the wedding, the vampire king ordered her, "Give me a child and leave London." But in silence, she began to weave her own plan. She turned the child into a source of her strength and her truth, using it to claim her identity and freedom in London, and forced the king to bow on his own terms. In the end, the king realized that the woman he had thought weak had become both his greatest punishment and his greatest victory. The wedding night order. London wore its night like velvet, heavy with fog and lamp glow. Carriages rattled past the townhouse windows, and the city sounded far away, as if it knew it wasn't invited inside. In the bedroom, the curtains were a deep red that made the moonlight look like it had been stained. A small lamp burned low, and the air smelled of old books, fresh flowers, and something colder beneath it all. Elena stood by the window in her simple white nightdress, her fingers pressed to the glass. Below, Big Ben watched over the river like a patient witness. She had dreamed of this city since she was a girl, dreamed of being someone here, not just someone's shadow. But tonight, she wasn't a dreamer. Tonight, she was a bride. A bride to the vampire king. Lucien Valebrook did not look like the stories. He didn't wear a crown or swagger like a villain. He stood near the fireplace in a dark embroidered coat, his pale hair pulled back, his posture perfectly controlled, like a man who had spent centuries learning how not to show pain. His eyes were the color of winter sky, sharp when they needed to be, but tonight there was something else in them. Something tired, something lonely. Elena could hear her own heartbeat, loud enough to feel embarrassing. She turned slowly. "Is this what you wanted?" she asked, and tried to keep her voice steady. Lucien's gaze moved to her face, not her neck. That detail mattered more than she expected. His voice came low, careful, as if every word had rules. "This marriage was not for love," he said. "It was for peace." Elena's mouth went dry, but she lifted her chin anyway. "Peace for who?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the side table where a silver tray held 2 cups of tea someone had clearly set out on purpose, as if ordinary rituals could soften an extraordinary fate. He picked up 1 cup, paused, then set it back down untouched. The small sound of porcelain was strangely loud. "For London," he said at last. "For my people, for yours." She wanted to laugh, an ugly, startled laugh, because it sounded like the kind of sentence men used when they meant, "You don't get to choose." But Elena swallowed it. She had promised herself something on the carriage ride here. If she was going to survive a life among monsters and legends, she would not become small. "I am not a treaty," she said. Lucien's eyes flickered, almost like a reaction he couldn't stop. For the first time, his composure loosened. "No," he said, quieter. "You're not." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing either. The tension between them wasn't the usual kind. It didn't feel like threat or hunger. It felt like standing too close to a storm you didn't understand, feeling its power, knowing it could destroy you, and realizing it might be holding itself back. Elena's fingers tightened around the edge of the window curtain. Then, "Why did you insist on marrying me?" Lucien looked past her shoulder, toward the city lights, as if London itself had an answer he didn't want to speak. When he finally met her eyes again, his voice came out like a verdict he hated delivering. "Because you were brave enough to say yes when everyone else ran," he said. "And because I need an heir before my council tears this kingdom apart." Elena felt her stomach drop. An heir. Lucien took a single step closer. Not predatory, measured, respectful, and still somehow overwhelming. His scent was clean, like cold rain and cedarwood, and it made her hate her own confusion. He held her gaze and said the sentence that changed the air in the room. "Give me a child and leave London." Elena stared at him, not sure she had heard correctly. Leave London, the city she loved, the life she wanted to build, the streets where she felt human and alive. He wasn't just asking for a child. He was asking her to disappear. A strange heat rose behind her eyes, sharp with humiliation. "So that's all I am," she whispered. "A womb and a goodbye." Lucien's jaw tightened, and for a moment she saw it. The effort it took for him to be king instead of man. He looked like someone trying to hold back a truth that might shatter both of them. "You don't understand," he said, and there was a crack in his calm. "If you stay, you will be hunted, used, broken. This city, my enemies, my own court, they will not leave you intact." Elena's laugh finally came, but it was breathless and shaking. "And you think sending me away is kindness?" His eyes softened, just for a second, and the softness was worse than coldness because it made her hope. "It's the only kindness I know how to give," Lucien said. Elena felt anger and fear, and something that tasted like grief for the version of this night she used to imagine. Still, her voice didn't break. She stepped forward until they were close enough that the space between them felt charged. "Then listen to me," she said. "I didn't come here to be protected like a secret. I came here to live." Lucien's gaze dropped to her hands, as if he was noticing how hard she was trembling while pretending she was. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "You think I don't want that for you?" Elena's chest tightened. She didn't expect him to sound torn. Then, from somewhere deep inside the house, a bell rang once. Not the gentle kind. A warning bell, low, urgent, the kind that changes the way a building breathes. The lamp flame flickered, and even the air seemed to pause. Lucien's entire body went still. He turned his head slightly, listening to something Elena couldn't hear. His expression shifted from guarded to razor-focused, like a man pulled back into a battlefield he never truly leaves. But before he moved, he looked at Elena with something that startled her more than any threat. Fear. Not fear of her. Fear for her. "Elena," he said, and his voice was suddenly intimate, urgent. "Whatever happens next, you must do exactly what I say. Do you understand?" Her throat went tight. "What's happening?" Lucien didn't answer. He reached for her hand, not like a king claiming property, but like a man anchoring someone precious. His fingers were cool, yet strangely gentle. And as the warning bell rang again, closer this time, Lucien whispered a name Elena had never heard before. "The widow court has found you." Elena's breath caught as the bedroom door began to open on its own, inch by inch, as if the darkness behind it had hands. Lucien stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body, his voice low and steady like a promise he intended to keep. "Stay behind me," he said, "and don't look them in the eyes." The door creaked wider, and Elena realized with a cold certainty that the king's order, "Give me a child and leave London," had never been about control. It had been a desperate attempt to save her. And now, whoever was on the other side of that door had come to take her before morning, the kindness hidden in the dark. The door opened fully, but no one stepped through it like a normal visitor. The hallway beyond looked longer than it should have been, stretched by shadow and candlelight that refused to settle. A chill rolled into the room, carrying a faint scent of crushed violets and wet stone, like a graveyard after rain. Elena stayed behind Lucien, but her curiosity fought her fear. She caught a glimpse of movement, dark veils, gloved hands, and faces half hidden by lace as if they were embarrassed by their own existence. 3 women stood there in silence, not breathing, not blinking, each wearing mourning black like a costume they'd never taken off. "The widow court," Lucien murmured, not to scare Elena, but to steady himself. His shoulders remained squared, yet the hand he held hers with tightened just a fraction. "You were not invited." The tallest widow tilted her head. She didn't smile, but her voice carried the shape of one, soft and cutting. "And yet we are always expected, Your Majesty, especially when you break tradition." Elena felt her pulse stutter. Break tradition. That meant the marriage, it meant her. Lucian's tone stayed level, but something simmered under it, like thunder behind a closed door. Say what you came to say. The widow's gaze drifted past him, trying to hook onto Elena. Lucian shifted, blocking the line of sight with a subtle, protective step. Elena didn't miss it. The king, who could command entire districts of London to kneel, was now positioning his body like a shield. The widow's lips pressed together in annoyance. We came for balance. A human bride inside the king's house is a loud gamble. Her eyes narrowed. Our patience is not infinite. Elena's voice surprised even herself when it came out. I'm standing right here. You can speak to me. Lucian turned his head slightly, warning in his eyes. Don't. But Elena had lived her whole life with people talking around her, deciding her fate as if she was furniture. Whatever monster these women were, she refused to shrink. The tallest widow looked pleased, as if Elena had stepped onto a trap she'd set. Brave, she murmured, or foolish. Lucian exhaled slowly, like he was forcing calm into his lungs. You will not test her. Another widow, shorter, her veil dotted with tiny beads, glided forward without her feet making a sound. She lifted something from within her cloak, a small silver charm shaped like a ring of thorns. It hummed in the air, making Elena's teeth ache. A blessing, the widow said sweetly, a protection for the bride. Lucian's voice turned sharp. No. The widow's head tilted. You refuse protection. I refuse your protection, Lucian replied, because your gifts come with strings that tighten around the throat. Elena's stomach clenched. Lucian wasn't just protecting her body, he was protecting her future, her choices, her mind. The tallest widow's tone cooled. We can protect her from what's coming, Lucian. From the hunters you've angered, from the factions inside your own court, from the streets that will swallow her whole. But if you won't accept our blessing, then we will take our own assurance. Elena's grip on Lucian's hand tightened. What does that mean? Lucian didn't answer her. His attention locked on the charm, as if he'd seen this play before and hated how it ended. Then, without warning, the room's lamp flame stretched sideways, flickering hard as if a wind blew through it, but the curtains didn't move. The air thickened. Elena felt an invisible pressure, like a hand pushing down on her shoulders. The widows began to speak in a language Elena didn't know, their voices weaving together until it sounded like a lullaby sung backward. The silver charm pulsed. Elena's vision blurred at the edges. Lucian reacted instantly. He stepped between Elena and the charm, lifting his free hand as if he could physically block the sound. His face tightened, not with rage, but with concentration and restraint. Enough, he commanded. The widows, chanting, faltered but didn't stop. Elena's knees wobbled. Something inside her, some quiet instinct, told her the widows weren't trying to hurt her in the obvious way. They were trying to claim something, mark her, make her a piece on their board. Lucian's voice dropped lower, dangerous and controlled. If you touch her mind, I will dismantle your influence in every district before dawn. The tallest widow gave a small laugh. Listen to yourself, threatening widows in your own home. You've grown sentimental. Lucian didn't deny it. Instead, he did something Elena didn't expect from a creature whispered about in fearful bedtime stories. He bowed his head. Just slightly, barely noticeable, but it was unmistakable. I am asking, Lucian said, his voice thick with something that sounded like humility. As your king, and as a man who has made too many enemies, let her go. The room went so quiet Elena could hear the distant tick of a clock downstairs. The widows stared, as if they'd never seen him kneel emotionally, even by an inch. Elena's throat burned. Kings didn't ask, kings took. Yet here he was choosing pride's opposite for her safety. The shortest widow's eyes flickered with something almost human. Regret, perhaps, but the tallest widow hardened. We cannot, she said. Not anymore. Lucien's shoulders tensed. Why? The tallest widow lifted her gloved hand and pointed. Not at Elena's throat, not at her heart, but at her left wrist. Elena looked down. A faint, dark mark had appeared on her skin, like ink beneath the surface. An elegant crescent shape, delicate and wrong. It hadn't been there minutes ago. Lucien's face drained of color, which was saying something for a vampire. His fingers went to Elena's wrist, careful, almost reverent, as if touching it might hurt her. His eyes moved like he was reading a sentence written in bloodless ink. Elena's voice trembled. What is that? Lucien didn't speak immediately. His expression was a storm of calculation and fear held under iron control. The tallest widow's voice softened into something that sounded like pity. A vow-mark, an ancient claim. You didn't notice because you were busy playing husband. Elena's mind spun. Claimed by who? Lucien's jaw tightened, as if the name itself tasted bitter. The first king, he whispered. Elena felt the room tilt. But he's not dead, the tallest widow finished calmly. Not sleeping, not gone, and now he knows exactly where you are. Lucien's hand stayed around Elena's wrist, but the gentleness was gone, replaced by urgency. His gaze snapped to the window, to the fog outside, as if he expected eyes in the darkness. Elena's voice came out small, betrayed. You married me to save me, didn't you? Lucien swallowed, and for the first time his control cracked enough for her to see the truth behind it. I married you, he said, because it was the only shield I could place between you and him. The tallest widow stepped back as if the game piece had moved into position. The vow-mark means the first king can call you. He can pull you through shadows the way a tide pulls a ship. Unless... Unless what? Elena asked, breathless. The widow's gaze slid to Lucien, satisfaction sharpening her silence. Unless Lucien does what you refuse to do, Your Majesty. Lucien's eyes narrowed. Speak. The widow lifted her chin. Bind her to you fully, not as a political bride, not as a temporary promise. Seal her into your bloodline. Elena froze. The words landed like a cold chain. Lucien's hand released her wrist as if he was afraid his touch might become a decision. He looked at Elena, really looked, and the fear in his eyes wasn't for himself. It was the fear of becoming the kind of monster she'd been taught to hate. I won't steal your life, he said, voice rough, even to save it. Elena's chest tightened so hard it hurt. She wanted to shout that she didn't want to be bound to anyone. She wanted to run. She wanted the city streets and ordinary people and sunlight and freedom. But then the mark on her wrist pulsed once, warm, alive, like something waking up inside her skin. The air by the window darkened. Not the normal dark of night, but a deeper dark, thick as velvet, pooling in the corner of the room as if shadows were gathering themselves into a door. The widows went still, even they seemed wary now. Lucien stepped toward Elena again, putting himself between her and that growing darkness. His voice turned gentle, almost pleading. Elena, he said, tell me you trust me. Tell me right now. Elena's lips parted, but no sound came. Trust felt like a luxury when a shadow was opening in her room. The darkness rippled, and a voice slid out of it, quiet, amused, ancient. Little bride, it whispered, as if it had been waiting behind her heartbeat all along. Come home. Elena's wrist burned. The floor seemed to fall away beneath her feet. And Lucien, who had sworn to never take her life, reached for her with a desperation that looked heartbreakingly human, as the shadows began to pull her toward the window, the child, the city, and the choice that broke the curse. The shadows didn't drag Elena like chains. They tempted her like sleep, warm and persuasive, promising an end to fear. Her wrist burned with the crescent mark, and the fog outside the window thickened until London looked like a dream someone forgot to finish. Lucien grabbed Elena around the waist and pulled her back from the window with a strength that was careful, controlled, like he was terrified of hurting her. His arms were cold through her nightdress, but the way he held her was not possession. It was panic. It was love trying not to say its name. "Look at me," he said, voice shaking at the edges. "Elena, don't listen, don't answer him." The ancient voice purred from the shadow pool near the window. "Still playing hero, Lucien. You were always good at dramatic gestures." Elena wanted to cover her ears, but her hands wouldn't quite obey. Her mind felt split, half in the room, half somewhere far away where a throne waited for her like a trap disguised as destiny. Then Lucien did something so unexpected it snapped Elena back into herself. He stepped aside. Not away from danger. He stepped aside from control. He loosened his grip, lowered his hands, and stood in front of her with his palms open as if offering surrender. "I won't bind you," he said, loud enough for the shadows to hear. "I won't command you. If you choose to go, I will not stop you." Elena's breath caught. She had been bracing for him to make the choice for her, to force the bond, to save her by stealing her future. Instead, he placed the decision into her hands, even though it could destroy him. A strange thing happened in the air, like the room itself paused to witness it. The shadow voice sharpened. How noble, how conveniently helpless. Lucien's eyes didn't leave Elena. "I have lived too long as a king who takes," he said. "I will not be a husband who takes." Elena felt the mark flare again. Her knees weakened, and she stumbled back into the bed frame. In that moment, she understood the cruelty of the first king's magic. It wasn't only pulling her body. It was tugging at her loneliness. It was whispering that she would never truly belong here. Her voice came out thin. "If I go, what happens to you?" Lucien's jaw tightened, and for the first time he didn't hide the cost. "My council will crown someone worse," he admitted. "And London will pay for it, but that's not your burden. You didn't ask for this." Elena laughed once, small, trembling, almost funny in how wrong it sounded in the middle of terror. "You're the strangest monster I've ever met." For a heartbeat, Lucien's mouth twitched like he almost smiled. The curtains billowed though the windows were shut. The shadow at the window thickened, and a figure began to form, not fully, not clearly, more a suggestion than a body. It felt like looking at a nightmare through fog. "Come," the voice coaxed. "I will make you eternal. I will make you important. I will give you a child with a crown." Elena swallowed hard. The offer landed like a hook because it dressed itself as empowerment. But something inside her, something stubborn and alive, rose up. "No," she whispered. The shadow stilled. "What did you say?" Elena looked at Lucien. His face was calm, but his eyes were a storm held back by sheer will. In them she saw the truth. He wasn't asking her to be his shield. He had tried to make himself hers. "I said no," she repeated louder. The crescent mark on her wrist pulsed, then burned, then cooled, like it was testing whether she meant it. The shadow voice turned sweet again, dangerous in its softness. "You cannot refuse a vow-mark." Elena's gaze flicked to the silver tray beside the tea, still untouched. On it lay a small letter opener, decorative, harmless. Beside it was a folded napkin embroidered with the Valebrook crest. Ordinary objects, human objects. The kind of small things that meant you lived in a world of mornings and meals and choices. She reached for the napkin instead of the blade and wrapped it around her wrist, covering the mark like she was refusing to let it see her. Lucien's brow furrowed. "Elena." "I can refuse anything that feeds on my fear," she said. Her voice steadied as she spoke, as if courage was something you could grow in your mouth by using it. "And I think your magic feeds on fear." The shadow hissed, not in pain, but in irritation, like a liar being recognized. Elena turned to Lucien, and the words came out before she could second-guess them. "You told me to give you a child and leave London," she said, "but you never once asked what I wanted." Lucien flinched as if struck, not because she was cruel, but because she was right. Elena drew a shaky breath. "I want to stay, not because I'm reckless and not because I'm trapped. I want to stay because this city is mine too, and because you don't deserve to fight alone." Lucien's eyes widened with something like grief. "Elena, staying means—" "It means we stop running," she interrupted. Her voice trembled, but she didn't back down. "It means we face it with daylight rules, honesty, community, and help. You're a king. Use the part of your power that protects, not the part that threatens." From the doorway, the widows watched in tense silence. Even they looked uncertain, as if they had expected blood and domination, not a human woman choosing to stand beside a creature of the night out of principle. The shadow voice laughed, low, ancient, mocking. "Daylight rules, in my world." Elena took one step forward. Her knees wanted to fold, but she forced them straight. "Then I'll bring daylight into it," she said, and before she knew she was doing it, she reached for Lucien's hand again, openly, deliberately. That simple gesture, human warmth in a room full of cold, changed something. Lucien's fingers curled around hers, not tight, not possessive, just present. His shoulders loosened as if he'd been carrying a loneliness heavier than his crown. The shadow at the window surged, offended. Lucien spoke to it, voice like iron wrapped in velvet. "She is not yours." The shadow's answer came like a whisper against glass. "Then bind her, seal her, or lose her." Lucien turned his head slightly, his gaze never leaving Elena. "You said you wanted to stay," he murmured, "but I will not chain you to me." Elena's throat tightened. "Then don't," she said. "Don't make me your prisoner, make me your partner." The word hung between them, partner. Lucien's face shifted, centuries of guardedness rearranging into something raw. He nodded once, small and solemn, like a vow made without ceremony. "All right," he said, "then we do this together." The widows tensed, as if waiting for something violent. Instead, Lucien did something almost domestic. He crossed the room, took the untouched teacup, and poured the tea with hands that did not shake. The normality of it was absurd, almost funny. The world threatened to collapse, and the vampire king was pouring tea like an exhausted husband trying to keep a household from falling apart. Elena let out a breath that sounded like a laugh and a sob at the same time. "Is this your strategy?" she whispered. "Tea." Lucien's mouth finally curved barely. "It's not for you," he said. "It's for them." He lifted the cup and held it out toward the shadowed window, not as an offering of obedience, but as a refusal of fear. It was a human ritual turned into a weapon, calmness in the face of intimidation. The shadow recoiled slightly, like it hated being treated as ordinary. Lucien spoke clearly, for the widows and the darkness and the walls themselves. "The first king's vow-mark is fueled by secrecy," he said. "By silence, by isolation. That's why you told me to send her away. That's why you thought you could take her." The tallest widow's eyes narrowed. "You cannot break a vow-mark with a speech." "No," Lucien agreed, "but you can break it with witness." He turned to the widows. "You came here to claim balance. Then witness this. I will not rule through fear. I will not trade her life for my throne, and I will not hide her." Elena felt her skin prickle. The crescent mark under the napkin heated, then cooled again, like an animal uncertain of its leash. Lucien continued, voice steady, almost tender. "Elena is not an object, not a treaty, not a womb. She is a person with a will." The shadow voice sharpened. "Words." Lucien glanced at Elena, asking permission with his eyes. Elena understood. She lifted her covered wrist and nodded. Lucien leaned in, not to bite, not to claim. He pressed his lips gently to the napkin on her wrist, right over the mark. A kiss, not a wound, a vow made without blood. And Elena felt it, something in her chest unlocking. Not magic flooding her veins, not darkness claiming her. Choice. The crescent mark flared once, bright-hot, then dimmed, like a candle starved of air. The shadow screamed, not with gore or violence, but with pure frustration, like a tyrant losing the one thing it relies on, obedience. The darkness at the window thinned, twisting, trying to hold shape. Elena's legs went weak, and Lucien caught her immediately, cradling her like something precious, his cheek pressed briefly to her hair as if he couldn't help himself. From the doorway, the shortest widow whispered, almost in awe, "He refused the old way." The tallest widow's expression flickered, anger mixed with something reluctant. Respect, perhaps. "You risk your reign for her." Lucien didn't look at the widow. He looked at Elena. "I risked my soul long ago," he said quietly. "I'm simply tired of pretending it was worth it." The shadow made one last attempt, voice syrup-sweet again. "You can still be great, Elena. Say yes, and I will make you untouchable." Elena lifted her chin, tears hot in her eyes. "Untouchable is another word for lonely," she said. "I'd rather be human and loved than powerful and empty." The room fell silent. The fog outside the window began to move normally again, like ordinary weather instead of a living thing. The darkness retreated, folding back into the corner until it was just shadow again. Just night, not a doorway. Elena's breath came in shaky waves. She looked at Lucien, and her voice softened. "About what you demanded," she said. "A child and leaving." Lucien's face tightened with shame. "I spoke from fear. I thought if you left, you'd be safe. I thought I could endure anything if you weren't harmed." Elena touched his cheek. His skin was cool, but his eyes were warm in a way that made her throat ache. "You don't have to endure alone," she said, "and I'm not leaving London." Lucien closed his eyes briefly, as if those words hurt and healed at once. When he opened them, he looked younger, still powerful, still terrifying in legend, but unmistakably human in emotion. The tallest widow cleared her throat. "The vow-mark has loosened," she said, voice careful now. "But it is not gone. The first king will return with another method." Lucien nodded once. "Then he will meet a kingdom that isn't hiding anymore." Elena blinked. A kingdom. Lucien looked toward the window, toward the sleeping city. "London has always been a city of secrets," he said. "Tonight we replace secrets with trust." The shortest widow stepped forward hesitantly and placed something on the table. The silver thorn charm, but now it looked dull, harmless. "If you insist on daylight rules," she murmured, "then you'll need allies who understand the dark." Elena eyed it. "Is that your way of apologizing?" The widow's veil shifted as if she might have smiled. "It is my way of being, less terrible." Elena let out a surprised laugh, small, genuine, the first real laugh of the night. Even Lucien's lips quirked again, and for one brief second the room felt like a home instead of a battlefield. Lucien helped Elena sit on the edge of the bed, then crouched in front of her, lowering himself until his eyes were level with hers. A king kneeling, not from defeat, but from devotion. "I can't promise you a safe life," he said, "but I can promise you an honest one, and if someday you choose to give me a child, it will be because you wanted it, not because I demanded it." Elena's eyes burned. "And if I never do?" Lucien's answer came without hesitation. "Then you are still my queen," he said simply, "and London is still your home." Outside, Big Ben struck the hour, slow and steady. The sound rolled through the fog like a heartbeat returning to normal. Elena rested her forehead against Lucien's for a moment, gentle, brave, unbelievably tender. "Then let's make him regret coming for me," she whispered. Lucien's eyes lifted, hardening with purpose, but his voice stayed soft. "We will," he promised. Not with cruelty, with courage. As dawn's first pale light began to thin the night at the edges of the curtains, Elena realized what the deepest twist truly was. The Vampire King's greatest power wasn't immortality. It was restraint. It was choosing kindness when fear begged him to choose control. And somewhere far beneath London, deep in tunnels older than the city itself, something ancient stirred, furious and hungry for obedience. But above ground, in a bedroom that still smelled of tea and rain, a human woman and a weary king held hands like a vow the darkness couldn't understand. Because the curse had finally met the one thing it couldn't devour. A free will witnessed,